old consoles. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for the support in the last video. It is my best performing video and I'm really happy about that. I put a lot of work into it, and I can see by the credits people other than me worked on that video as well, so I'm really happy that video did as well as I did. I know there was some audio problems. That was my fault. It was my friend edited it for me and he uses a different software than I use, so I wasn't 100% familiar with the audio. It sounded fine when I did it, but I think I just didn't get the audio quite right before. But other than that, the video did really good. I'm glad everyone liked it. And yeah, and sorry again for not uploading last week or delaying the video this week. Milton came through here, and I probably could have gotten the video up, but I would have been rushing to get that up along with the hurricane preparation, so I just decided to forego the video just to make it easier so I don't have to worry about too much. So yeah, I'll just start off by saying I'm fine. Pretty much everyone I know is okay. I don't know anyone that's been impacted, but there are parts of Florida that are pretty bad. So if you go to donate.jakester0565.com, there'll be a link in the description and a QR code on the screen. You can donate to the American Red Cross for Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton support. I don't see any of that money goes straight to the charity, so yeah, I highly suggest you make a donation. I have a goal of $500 right now, but hopefully we get higher than that. So yeah, if you have any spare cash, you know, just $5 or $10, just throw it that way. It's you know, it's pretty messed up in certain areas of the country right now, so all the support they can get would be great. But anyway, most of my videos, I think all of my videos for the most part, have been on Nintendo and Sony, or Nintendo and PlayStation. So let's talk about the two gaming companies, the third one and the extinct one today, since I've never talked about either of these really. I mean, I think I've talked a little bit about Xbox, but I've talked a little bit about Sega. I talked about it in the last video, but nothing like too major. I've never really like done a whole video on either one of these, so I think this is a good topic to discuss, and I kind of want to discuss how I think these two, specifically this one, is sort of like a repeat of history, and you'll see why. So we'll just get a little bit of backstory. I believe in 2001 or 2002, Sega threw in the hat. They were done making consoles. The Dreamcast was their last console. It was released in 1998 and discontinued in 2001. Some games were still made for it even after it was discontinued. It was still supported by Sega, but it basically became just multi-platform releases. There's no more exclusives for the Dreamcast, and many of the Dreamcast exclusives were moved over to Xbox, GameCube, and PS2. So basically, I would say the Xbox or Microsoft basically replaced Sega as, you know, the third pillar of the big three, you know, which are Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. But it used to be Nintendo and Sega, and then Nintendo and Sony basically, and then Sega was sort of there. But you know, I feel like Microsoft did replace Sega, and I mean they did. They didn't basically do it. They did replace Sega. And just to be clear, I'm going to be using the terms Microsoft and Xbox interchangeably. I know Xbox is the brand and Microsoft is the company, but for all intents and purposes, Xbox and Microsoft are going to mean basically the same thing. So, yeah, and it's actually a little ironic that with Microsoft, because I don't know if you notice this right here. It says compatible with Windows CE, which is Windows Compact Embedded. Now, this is not the tech channel. What does this look like? Texter0565? What loser runs that? If you like tech, please subscribe to my tech channel, Texter0565. I'm making more videos there soon, I promise. But basically, Windows Compact Embedded, I don't want to get too technical. It's basically a very stripped down version of Windows, I believe Windows NT, Windows NT. It's a very stripped down version of Windows that's designed to run on, you know, very minor, you know, hardware like ATMs, portables, like single-use devices. It's basically a very stripped-down version of Windows that's basically designed to run one application and one application only. It's basically called Windows IoT now, or Windows IoT LTS. It's basically the same thing, but it's basically just a very stripped-down version of Windows that's designed to run one application, and it's basically just for compatibility reasons. That's Linux is probably its biggest competitor. But yeah, Microsoft did develop, technically did develop the software for the Dreamcast, and then they went on and made their own console. So yeah, there's a reason I do have both of these up here. But when I say Microsoft is the new Sega, I don't just mean that, well, Microsoft just went in and replaced Sega. There's a very good analogy here. So I would actually say that the Xbox, not technically wise, but history wise, should not be compared against the Dreamcast. It should be compared against the Master System. Now, there's a very good explanation for this. So, why am I comparing these two? Well, these two are way more similar in terms of history than one might think. So, these are both Sega and Microsoft's first home consoles. I mean, technically this is a little bit, but this is, for all intents and purposes, the Mark III / the Master System is Sega's first home console, and then obviously the Xbox is Microsoft or Xbox's first home console. So, yeah, these are each one's first home console, and on top of that, they had the most power of the consoles it's competing against. This had more power than the GameCube and the PS2, and this had more power than the NES. Which is, so that's another way they're similar. And another way they're similar is that while they weren't failures, both of them, they were far from the top dog in most regions. So basically, the Master System or the SG-1000 Mark III never really saw success outside of Europe. I mean, it did okay, but it wasn't super successful compared to the NES. Xbox definitely was not that successful compared to the PS2. But I mean, it's sort of unfair, but I think it may have sold a little bit more than GameCube. But, comparatively to their main competition, they did okay, but they were not even close. Xbox, really only did super well in the United States, and the Master System basically did only really well in Europe. So, this is what I was sort of talking about. Now, I don't want to talk about this, aspect as much, but this is going to build a pattern that you'll see here to get to my point. And yeah, this is where I sort of think, their first efforts are very similar. They're more powerful than the competition. They're less restrictive than the competition. And, they didn't do as well against the competition. And, it's both their first efforts. So, and they both did well in a specific region, America and Europe. So, this is where I'm just trying to build a pattern. So we'll keep going on. So now let's move on to each manufacturer's next system. Both Sega and Microsoft basically saw the same thing on the wall. Sega knew that the Master System was never going to catch up to the NES. Microsoft knew that the Xbox was never going to come up and catch to the PlayStation 2. So instead of, trying to compete with current gen hardware, why not get a leg ahead and start with developing next gen hardware? And Microsoft and Sega's solutions to this were, this is backwards, the Xbox 360 and the Sega Genesis. This is where the similarities really start to come in. So, let's start with Sega. Sega knew the Master System was never going to beat the NES. So instead, they knew that 16-bit was going to be the next big thing. So they went ahead of Nintendo and developed the first, or they developed, not the first, but I think maybe the first, I'm not 100% sure, but they got ahead of Nintendo and came out with a 16-bit console first. In America, this released in 1989. The Super Famicom in Japan released in 1990, and the SNES released in 1991 in America. So in America, this got a 2-year head start. I should say in Europe and in Japan, it's called the Mega Drive. If you saw the last video, you know all about that. But for all intents and purposes, I'm talking about North America for most of this video. So Sega came out with the Genesis first as a leg ahead to get ahead of the competition, get a better foothold. And, that worked for Sega. They were basically neck and neck with Nintendo. I think Nintendo may have been a little bit higher most of the time, but they were basically neck and neck with Nintendo the entire generation, and they had basically about a 50-50 market share. throughout the entire generation. So yeah, the strategy did work very well for Sega. And I mean, basically Microsoft did the exact same thing. They knew they weren't going to compete, the Xbox was not going to compete with the PS2. So instead, what they did was they came out with the Xbox 360 about a year ahead of when the PS3 would come out. So they did the same thing. They knew HD was going to be the next big thing, and they knew that Sony, was a little bit behind, not behind, but it was going to be a little bit before the PS3. So they decided to get ahead of it. They got about a year ahead, much like, Sega got 2 years ahead, but they got a year ahead in front of the PS3. And, there's another similarity right there. And, Xbox 360 did really well. I think technically the PS3 beat out market share of the Xbox 360 right at the end, but I don't want to say that that's really 100% true, because basically Microsoft has never done well in Japan, and that's always a problem. But in markets where it was actually competitive, I believe the Xbox 360 either was neck and neck neck and neck in the end, or it sold the PS3 at the end. So yeah, Sony was the one doing catch up in this case, pretty much the whole generation. Even during the Red Ring of Death, the Xbox 360 was still way more popular than the PS3 because of the price, and even after the price, it was just sort of cemented. So yeah, this is where again we start having more similarities. We have some other similarities too. They both kind of had add-ons. I don't want to move it, but this is obviously a redesigned Genesis. This is the redesigned 360, but they had the Sega CD and the 32X, both hardware add-ons, and obviously Microsoft had the Kinect. Now, I will admit these add-ons are completely different purposes, but I just sort of find it, that both of these companies released add-ons, even though the Sega CD and the 32X were designed to increase the power of the Genesis, and the Kinect was designed to give the 360, more appeal to a casual audience to compete against the Wii. But, they both did have, these big add-ons that, you don't really see console add-ons as much as you used to anymore. But here, in both cases, you saw some two big add-ons and one big add-on for each of these consoles. So, yeah, this is where, again, we start, you start seeing the similarities again. They both came out ahead of the competition, and because they got that ahead of, the new technology, they were able to stay competitive, whereas before they were not nearly as competitive, and now they were pretty much neck and neck with their own competition. So now here comes the part, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. This is where you start to see the pattern. Also, I should say the original Xbox 360 also has some parallels to the original PlayStation, where it kind of hold on. So the I'm going to go into this really quick. But the 360 kind of reminds me of the original PlayStation and kind of the PS2, but mostly the PlayStation, because, Nintendo was pretty much the domineering power, and, they got a little cocky and, decided to stick with cartridges for the N64. And Sony, the new guy, came out with CDs, and they were able to beat Nintendo out of their own market, and Nintendo's never been at the top since. So yeah, that's another way they sort of did it. Whereas this, with the PS2, Sony was at the top, and they got cocky with this, $600 console, and Microsoft came in, not with newer technology, but they came in, with a better price and, more appealing features, and sort of dethroned them. So yeah, I thought it was a little there, good analogy there as well, but that's not the main point of this video. Now, this is where the pattern starts to emerge. Obviously, both of these manufacturers came out with a follow-up. For Sega, it was the Sega Saturn. I bet a lot of you don't know what that is, but that's okay. And the Xbox One. So, here we go again with the pattern. Both of these consoles very much failed at the beginning for a very important reason. They were both too cocky off their previous success with the Genesis and the Xbox 360, and they both did something stupid. They made the consoles too expensive. The Sega Saturn launched at $400, while the PS1 famously was
$299.
The Xbox One launched at $500, and the PS4 was $400. They both launched high, and they both thought they were justified to make these consoles this price because of their previous success, which you can argue that Sony did the same thing with the PS3 because of the PS2, and they thought they had loyalty when they didn't. And I think Microsoft sort of, it's a very good comparison, but as well, but we'll stick with this narrative. But yeah, they both basically, these sort of failed for the same reason. Is just that price. Now, I don't know if Sega dropped the price of the Saturn, but Microsoft sure did drop the price of the Xbox. But because of that late head start, both of these consoles never got successful at all. I mean, I think the Xbox, well, okay, this was a failure. Xbox One, not so much. But again, we need to compare it to the competition. The Xbox One basically never caught up to the PS4. It did fine. It was not a financial failure. Well, I think it was, but it wasn't, a complete failure. They did stick around, and they did have a much more powerful effort, way more than Sega ever did with the Saturn, relative to its time. But it lost the foothold it had for the previous generation. And Sega did the same thing as well. They went from the cool kids to the oh my god, you're ripping us off people. And and again, this also kind of goes with Sony and the PS3. I think Microsoft kind of did the same thing here, and I think Sony's kind of doing the same thing again with the PS5, but we'll talk about that soon. But yeah, this is where we start seeing that pattern. So this is where the pattern starts to break up a bit, but you can kind of see where we're going from here. And I should say there was a reason. There was some benefits over the Sega Saturn being $400. It came with a game, and it came with memory built in, whereas the PS1 did not come with a game, and it did not come with a memory card. But still, it's still hard to get over that price point. So yeah, this is where we start seeing more of a pattern, and then we'll go over to the last thing. They did decide, both companies did decide to give it another go with the Dreamcast and the Series X. So, more of the same, kind of. With the Dreamcast, they did get ahead of the technology again. Microsoft, they announced the Xbox Series X much sooner than the PS5 was announced, like a whole year, almost like a year before. So they did kind of get ahead, and the Xbox Series X is a little ahead, a little bit better than the PS5 technology-wise, but not really. It's basically the same. It's basically the same chip, and it's basically the same. The games run about exactly the same. But Sega did get ahead of the competition by going with 128-bit graphics, in this more refined area, like the GameCube, PS2, Xbox era. So they did do that, but for sort of different reasons, they both again never caught on because of past failure. Xbox Series X is being outsold by the PS5 3-1. So for every 3 PS5s they sell one Xbox Series X or S. And Sega, I don't know what the number is, but they never caught up. I mean, they gave up after this, so but I think it sort of comes from the same reasons. I think it's because Phil Spencer has talked about why the Xbox One was the worst console to lose. Because that's where digital games started becoming a thing, and people built up their digital libraries that stays only with Microsoft or with Sony. So because of that, people that got a PS4 and had a bunch of digital games, they're probably going to get a PS5 because they want to keep all their games. That's why, Phil Spencer's, they're going pretty hard on Game Pass, because they got to, give people a reason to leave Sony and leave all their games behind. So yeah, Sega, I think they couldn't compete with the PS2, and they just didn't really have any killer games. And I mean, let's be honest, the Xbox Series X doesn't really have any killer games. I mean, and I'm not even just talking about, well, you can play them on PC. I mean, you can, but I don't think people are flocking over to PC as much as the PC people want to think. And I thought that too, but I've sort of got back into consoles and I realized that's not the case. It's just that, well, PS5, while everyone says PS5 has no games, it does have games. It's got Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok. I know it's on PC, but that was until later, and PC people are not console people. But God of War Ragnarok, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Again, I know it's on PC. We're not counting that. All these games that aren't on Xbox. Sega had some exclusives. They would say it has more exclusives than this did, but it's just not compelling enough exclusives. Halo Infinite obviously was not enough of a compelling one. Forza Horizon 5, as much as I love that game, it's awesome, not compelling enough. Forza Motorsport, not compelling enough against Gran Turismo. I would say there's like almost no exclusive competitor to like God of War or Horizon Zero Dawn, like none. The big appeal to this console, and I do like this console actually, is Game Pass, and I love Game Pass, but it's not enough of an appeal because you're not really getting any games that you can't play. You're getting some, not many. I guess Starfield maybe is the competitor to Horizon Zero Dawn or God of War, but the Indiana Jones game, I guess, but that's coming on PS5. And this is where, again, we start noticing some of the similarities, because this is the point, and I feel like this is the point, where both Microsoft and Sega, at this point in their console lifespans, started becoming third-party developers for the competition. Sega ported a lot of Dreamcast games, including my copy of Crazy Taxi I have on here, although this is the best version of Crazy Taxi, in my opinion. But Sega started making games for the competitors, and Microsoft as well making games for the competitors. And this is where I'm curious, is where we can sort of look at history to tell us what's going to happen with the future. As they say, history repeats itself, and I think this is very true with Microsoft's case. There's a little bit of difference here, and Microsoft seems to be the point where they're going to try one more time. They're going to go for a fifth console, so I guess it's not completely close to Sega. But that's at least 3 years away is what I'm thinking. So unless they want to try to do another thing, get ahead of the competition with, they have no chance. They're not competing against the PS5 Pro, so I don't know if they're going to just try to get ahead of the PS6 or not. But there may be a business decision at some point at Microsoft where they just go, is it really worth it? I don't think the Xbox brand is going to die like Sega didn't die. I think what's going to happen, and they could come with another console, and either if they don't or if they do, neither one would surprise me. But I don't know if that other console is really going to even have a chance still. I feel like the Xbox as a console, as hardware, is sort of dead. I feel like Microsoft will be a game developer for PC and PlayStation, and I guess Nintendo. So this is where I want to say I feel like history is repeating itself. Microsoft has basically become the new Sega. Now, I have mentioned that there's some comparisons to Sony and Nintendo, and I think Sony is going to be kind of like, if Microsoft gets out of the console space and they just become a third-party developer like Sega, I feel like they're going to sort of go, Sony will sort of get like Nintendo was with the NES and the SNES, where I'm sure they'll start being more restrictive, they'll start thinking they can charge higher prices and whatnot. Sony gets cocky all the time, and then they get their ass handed to them, and then they get themselves in check, and then they start doing better and better and better, and then they get cocky again. So, that's Sony's history. But I feel like if we look at history, and we look at Sega, who, in my opinion, you can see there's some parallels. Now, I know it's not, correlation does not equal causation all the time, but, and it means Microsoft, so they got much more assets behind them, but I do feel like they've done a lot of the same stuff, and it is not unrealistic to think that this company will go the same way as this company. It's what I think is going to happen. I even if they come out with the next console, I think Microsoft will be the next Sega. But now, does that mean someone else is going to replace Microsoft? Does Nintendo maybe try to be a major player again? They may start making more powerful hardware. I don't know. They may see an absence and think that they can take it, especially with Microsoft, sort of, being on Nintendo's side, with the Switch this generation. So who knows? Maybe Microsoft throws their hat in with Nintendo, and they partner up, and the Switch 2 becomes the place for Xbox games. I wouldn't bet money on that, but who knows? That could happen. But yeah. So this video wasn't really scripted, as you can probably tell. But it's mostly opinion. Well, not completely opinion, but it's more subjective than objective, that I would say. So this is why I didn't really want to do a script. I was going to write one, but I was like, you know what? It's pretty much mostly opinion in this case. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on this matter. Do you think that Sega and Microsoft, Microsoft is going to be the new Sega? Do you think Microsoft maybe has a chance of coming back with Game Pass and the new Xbox? Or do you think they're just going to give up and just become a third-party developer? I mean, they kind of already have. I don't think Sega had one foot out the door quite like Microsoft. I think Sega, their whole body was outside the building, whereas Microsoft seems to have one foot out the door. I feel like that's a little bit different, but it's not that different. So yeah, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think Microsoft's going to be around? Do you think Xbox will stay around? I think it will. I think the Xbox brand is still somewhat profitable. I think the Xbox brand itself actually is profitable, and then we'll see it stick around on Windows and as a game developing label no matter what. I don't think Xbox is going away, just how Sega didn't go away. It's just not going to be a hardware manufacturer anymore. But yeah, just what do you think is going to happen? What do you if you didn't know the history of Sega, or you never thought about how it connected to Microsoft, let me know what you think, or if there's anything I missed. And yeah, just let me know. I'm curious what you think. It's a very interesting discussion to talk about. And I'd also like to once again ask you to check out my tech channel, where I'm uploading some tech videos. I have a video I'm making right now talking about some the VR headsets that are out right now, and what I think of them and comparing them to how it's been in the past. I think that'll be a pretty interesting video. And check out my Gamester channel, which I plan on start uploading some more, much more, how to describe it, not as like refined content, much more like just sit down in front of a camera, talk, and barely edit it kind of content. So yeah, please check that out. I plan on also starting like a fourth channel, which I know is getting a little brave there, but it's basically for topics that have nothing to do with anything else. It's just more about me than a topic. And yeah, please check out my the link if you have any money at all to give, even if it's like $5 or $10. Any amount helps. Florida is, and many states that are hit by Helene are in dire need of support. I'm okay. I'm running on I got power. I got everything back, but internet. So I'm running on Starlink. That's why this video is in 1080p and not 4K, because 4K would take 5 years to upload, and I don't feel like waiting that long. So yeah, yeah, please donate any little bit you can. I'm fine, and I want to thank everyone that asked about me and whatnot. But yeah, if you have any money to give at all, go to donate.jakester0565.com and check that out and donate if an amount you feel is appropriate or amount that you can. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you liked this video. This was a topic I was pretty much thinking about the entire off time. I was thinking about how to word this stuff, and I hope it came across the way I wanted it to. It's very objective in many ways. So yeah, videos will be on the regular schedule next week, I promise, for all my channels. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you. Comment, like, subscribe. Bye.